almost every post-Enlightenment political philosophy takes as its center some or another conception of freedom. That's usually the goal, is to maximize freedom, and the disagreement is just on what that means and the different ways of going about it. I have no interest in that. Not my goal. My goal is far more straightforward. It's usually just like a broad utilitarian maximization of comfort for the most people. But when you get deep into the ethical weeds, sometimes I have to admit that I also have a futurist, progress-oriented sort of a thing. I guess I'm a long-termist, you could say. That's the term that's become popular now for my view. And that really isn't so much comfort or pleasure as one day we will all be some kind of transhuman hive mind that experiences comfort and pleasure eternally. Where, when we create God / and or heaven. Doesn't matter which, same thing. God, heaven. We want there to be an infinite happy afterlife. So we create a being that is all of us and also is an infinite happy afterlife. Yeah, in case it wasn't clear, that's the goal. If you're looking for some kind of a meaning of life, there you go. I did it. I found it. That's what it is. It's machine God. You can try to find other ones, but they don't usually make sense. So granted that the goal is machine God, given that, making that an automatic sort of a given, right? Steps in that direction might fall along sort of a transhumanist path. I'm definitely pretty transhumanist personally, right? And a lot of transhumanists want to do away with pain and death and suffering more generally, a lot of these sorts of things, right? And some people philosophically don't like that because they've come to believe that pain is a necessary and inevitable part of human life. Some people believe that human life is like necessarily kind of 50-50 pain and pleasure, which I think is absurd. What kind of life are you living? You're at 50-50? You're at an even mix of pain and pleasure? You lucky bitch. I'm at like 90-10. Like 9 shit days, 1 I guess I could remain alive day. That's my ratio. Mostly shit. So, that hence the long-termism. I don't see much of a chance for the actual life I lead to become pleasant in the next 50 years. Certainly not in the next 5 to 10. So yeah, hence the desire for something more. Ultimately, that's where the idea of heaven came from. If you look at people like Nietzsche, they would argue that people started believing in heaven because they were slaves, and they wanted there to be something more than their life as slaves. Similar situation here, where I'm a generally cynical, bummed out person who's just unhappy with most of life. Not because I'm enslaved, just because I am a person, and life sucks generally for everyone at all times in history. So yeah, I would like to alleviate pain. I don't agree with those people that think that it's inevitable. But if you get outside of the spiritual guru type of stuff about why pain is inevitable, and you just start looking at what it does for a person, I think that raises some interesting philosophy stuff, right? Because people will say, well, you need pain, Some people are born without pain. That's a real thing. That's a condition that you can have. And a lot of times when they're very young children, they'll harm themselves in a number of ways accidentally. They'll bite their lip off, for example, because they can't feel when they're teething that they're hurting themselves. So yeah, that's not good. I agree. But let's be real here. Most of those people, most of that harm and injury that comes to them happens when they're small children, right? What do small children have in common? They don't know what you're saying verbally. So you can't tell a child, hey, you can't feel pain. Don't bite your lip off. You can't tell them that. They don't understand words yet. So you got to put little mouth guards or something or whatever, because all they have is that instinct and that feeling to protect them. And adults, that's not the case. But even adults with this condition have difficulties sometimes. You know, they might get cuts and bruises and burns and stuff because they don't detect it. But really, that's not a problem of pain. That's a problem of non-detection. Like, hypothetically, somebody could invent something that detects when they've injured themselves and then just makes a little noise, right? And hearing a little beep noise that goes, hey dude, you're injuring yourself. That's not the same as being in pain. It doesn't actually emotionally affect you. You don't feel it the same way you do pain. So I disagree with this functionalist theory that pain is fundamentally necessary. People will say, oh, you have a little kid, and the little kid sticks his thumb in a socket, he learns not to do it again. But realistically, most little kids in the real world don't actually stick their thumb in sockets. And they certainly don't, chop their finger off with the kitchen knife in order to learn not to do that. They're told, hey, if you're not careful, you're going to chop your finger off. And then they learn how to cut properly, usually starting with like a cut glove to protect their hand, and then only moving on to not using the cut glove once they're really skilled at it. They're told verbally, and they understand rationally what's going on. So at the root of this disagreement about what the goal is, right? Is the goal of politics freedom, or is the goal of politics comfort? And when you make the goal comfort, then you end up in these debates about pleasure and pain. And if you make the goal doing away with pain, you're implying something. You're implying that the solution to pain is higher rationality, these higher functionings that we have that are beyond just our mere instincts. You're implying going beyond gut impulse instincts and moving towards a society where things are governed more rationally by our minds. So now we move into communism. And I'm not using any of those, I don't use any of those pansy words, all right? None of this, oh, I'm a democratic socialist. Oh, I believe in socialism. No, we're using the big one. We're using communism, the scary one. I like the scary ones better. I don't know what's wrong with people. The scary words are better words. Oh, I'm an identitarian. No, you're not. You're a fascist. It's way more fun if you just say it. I don't understand these people. If I were a fascist, I would just walk around all day being like, yep, I'm a fascist. It would be fun, I think. Just own it. We're going to be using the scary word communism. There's a book called The Communist Postscript by Boris Groys. And I'm not going to bother trying to say, this is the right definition of communism. Because that is so annoying. All the debates and disputes about definitions of words that have been used in so many different ways for hundreds of years by different theorists and political movements and liars and non-liars that just disagree with one another. So I'm not going to say, here's what communism is. I'm going to say, here's what Boris Groys means when he says communism. And even if he's wrong, or whatever, even if you think he's wrong, just listen to what he thinks. He says that the vision of communism laid out in Marx and Engels and all of those texts, right, was a society that replaces the organization by money with the organization by language. So, what does that mean to replace with language? Well, historically, it usually means to replace with coordination or planning or some other form of top-down sort of a system. But I think the ideal being strived towards is not necessarily to have a tension between horizontal, decentralized systems that function off of our lower selves, our irrationality, our consumption choices. I think the ideal to strive towards is having collective bodies that embody this language-based, higher rational decision-making, while still being as centralized or decentralized as an effective system needs to be. At least that's my ideal politics to strive towards. But I suppose you could read Boris Groys's book to figure out what he believes. Although in my experience, these people do not have solutions most of the time. But think of that as an idea. Think of the connection there between trying to alleviate pain, and the way that we alleviate pain and its necessity on an individual level is through higher reasoning, conversation, being able to learn things intellectually. And on a deeper level, the idea that a political system might be rooted in that same goal of alleviating pain through language and higher rationality. That's a more interesting goal to me than something vague like empathy